Life changes in unexpected ways. One moment you're folding shirts in your family's small clothing store, dreaming of something more, and the next you're watching your father throw your accounting textbooks onto the wet pavement outside. I was 22 when it happened. The daughter who was supposed to carry on the family business, not the one who dared to want more. Our store, Fashion Corner, had been my parents' pride and joy for 25 years. They'd built it from nothing after immigrating to America, turning a tiny shop in a rundown strip mall into a moderately successful business. It wasn't much, but it was their everything. "Emily, fold these properly." Mom would snap, redoing my work for the 100th time. "How will you run this store if you can't even fold a simple sweater?" That was the thing. I never wanted to run the store. Don't get me wrong. I respected what my parents had built. I understood their sacrifice, the countless hours they'd worked to give me a better life. But their dream wasn't mine. I still remember the day I first saw the night class flyer at the community college. Associate's degree in accounting, evening classes available. My hands trembled as I took a photo of it with my phone. For weeks after, I'd lie awake at night, imagining a different future than the one my parents had planned. It took me 3 months to gather the courage to enroll. 3 months of secretly saving every tip, every extra dollar I could squeeze from my store salary. My plan was simple: work at the store during the day, take classes at night, and somehow make it all work. For 2 months, I managed to keep it hidden. I'd leave the store at 6 p.m., claiming I was meeting friends or going to the gym. Instead, I'd rush to my accounting classes, heart pounding with equal parts exhaustion and excitement. For the first time in my life, I felt alive, challenged, like I was moving towards something instead of standing still. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the middle of my advanced accounting class when my phone started buzzing. 20 missed calls from my parents. A customer had seen me walking into the college and mentioned it to my mother. By the time I got home, they were waiting. "What is this?" Dad demanded, holding up my course schedule that he found in my bag. His face was that particular shade of red I'd only seen a few times in my life. When we'd been robbed last year, when my brother told them he was moving to Europe for a job. "I can explain," I started, but Mom cut me off. "Explain what?" "That you're wasting your time with useless classes instead of learning the business. That you're throwing away everything we built for you." "I'm not throwing anything away," I protested. "I can do both. Work here during the day, study at night." "No." Dad's fist came down on the counter so hard the register rattled. "You choose right now. The store or these foolish classes." I looked at them both. My mother's disappointed face, my father's anger, and for the first time in my life, I chose myself. "The classes," I whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. "Then get out." Dad's voice was cold, final. He walked to my workstation, grabbed my accounting textbooks, and threw them through the front door onto the rain-soaked sidewalk. "If education is more important than family, then go. Don't come back until you've learned your place." Mom didn't say a word. She just turned her back, straightening a rack of dresses as if I'd already disappeared. I gathered my soaked books from the pavement, mascara running down my face as I tried to save the pages. My whole life was in that store, but as I watched my parents lock the door behind me, I realized something important. It wasn't the life I wanted. That night, I slept on my best friend Sophia's couch, my wet textbooks spread out on her coffee table to dry. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, bringing me a cup of tea and a blanket. "But what's your plan?" I stared at my books, their pages wrinkled, but still readable. I'm going to finish what I started, I said finally. I have to. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I found a job as a bookkeeper's assistant at a small firm, barely making enough to split rent with Safia. Every morning, I'd walk past Fashion Corner on my way to work, watching my parents open up through the big front windows. They never looked up, never acknowledged me. It was like I'd ceased to exist. My brother James tried to mediate at first. Just apologize, he'd say during our secret coffee meetings. Tell them you made a mistake. They'll forgive you. But I hadn't made a mistake. Every night in class, every practice problem I solved, every concept I mastered, it all felt right in a way that folding clothes never had. 1 year turned into 2. I finished my associate's degree with honors and immediately enrolled in a bachelor's program. My entry-level bookkeeping job became a junior accountant position. I moved out of Safia's place into a tiny studio apartment of my own. Still, every morning, I'd walk past the store. Mom and Dad were always there, working just as hard as they had when I was a child. The strip mall around them was changing. Stores closing, new ones opening, rents rising with each passing year. But Fashion Corner remained frozen in time, exactly as I remembered it, until the day I saw the notice posted on the building's main entrance. No TIC of SAALE, prime retail location. All inquiries to Maxwell Real Estate Group. My heart stopped. The whole strip mall was being sold. What would happen to my parents' store? To their dream? I knew from my morning walks that business hadn't been great lately. The neighborhood was gentrifying, and Fashion Corner's outdated inventory and tired storefront stood out like a relic from another era. That night, I couldn't sleep. My parents might have thrown me out, but they were still my parents. The store might not have been my dream, but it was theirs. And now, after 25 years, they might lose everything. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Property records, tax assessments, market values. Numbers had become my language, and what they told me wasn't good. The strip mall was undervalued, and any new owner would likely double or triple the rents to match market rates. My parents would never be able to afford it. I sat there in my tiny apartment, surrounded by textbooks and financial statements, and made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I called Maxwell Real Estate Group. The receptionist almost dismissed me until I mentioned I was interested in purchasing, not leasing. Suddenly, her tone changed. Miss Carter? Yes, Mr. Maxwell can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. I looked at my bank account that night. 5 years of aggressive saving and smart investments had left me with a decent nest egg, but nowhere near enough to buy a commercial property. Still, I put on my best suit, the one I'd bought to celebrate my promotion to senior accountant, and walked into that meeting like I belonged there. Robert Maxwell was exactly what you'd expect from a successful real estate broker. Expensive suit, practiced smile, firm handshake. So, Miss Carter, you're interested in the Riverside Strip Mall? Yes, I said, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Particularly, the unit currently occupied by Fashion Corner. His eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting choice. That's one of our less profitable units. The current tenants are on a very old lease agreement. Any new owner would want to adjust that to market rates. My stomach clenched. And what are the current market rates? When he named the figure, my blood ran cold. It was triple what my parents were paying. They'd never survive that increase. The entire property is listed at $2.8 million. he continued, sliding a glossy brochure across his desk. "We're expecting significant interest." I took the brochure, my mind racing. $2.8 million might as well have been $28 million. Even with my savings and excellent credit, no bank would give me a loan that size based on my current salary. But I had something else: knowledge. 5 years of accounting work had taught me to read between the lines of financial statements. 3 years of networking had given me contacts in the real estate industry. 2 years of advanced business classes had shown me how to spot opportunities others might miss. "I'd like to see the property's financial records," I said. Maxwell looked surprised, but agreed. For the next week, I spent every free moment analyzing those documents. The previous owner had been neglecting the property for years. Several units were vacant, and the occupied ones were severely under market. The building needed repairs, but nothing structural. Most importantly, the owner was motivated to sell quickly due to health issues. I made some calls. Sophia, now a successful real estate attorney, helped me understand the legal aspects. My old professor from business school introduced me to a group of private investors who specialized in commercial properties. My boss at the accounting firm gave me a glowing reference when the bank started asking questions. 2 weeks later, I walked back into Maxwell's office with a proposal: $2.2 million, with 20% down from a combination of my savings and private investors. The rest would come from a commercial loan backed by the property's potential income once brought up to market rates. "Bold strategy," Maxwell said, reviewing my proposal. "But risky. What makes you think you can turn this property around?" I pulled out my detailed business plan. "Because I understand this neighborhood. I know what it needs, and I know how to provide it." The negotiations took another month. Every night, I'd walk past the store, watching my parents close up shop, unaware that their daughter was fighting to secure their future. Sometimes, Mom would step outside to sweep the sidewalk, and I'd duck into doorways to avoid being seen. It hurt, but I wasn't ready to face them. Not yet. Finally, after what felt like endless meetings, paperwork, and sleepless nights, I had the keys in my hand. I was now the owner of the Riverside Strip Mall, including my parents' store. The first few months were a blur of activity. I hired contractors to repair the roof and update the facade. I brought in a professional property management company to handle day-to-day operations. Most importantly, I made sure all communications with current tenants came from the management company, not me. One by one, I filled the vacant units with carefully selected businesses: a trendy coffee shop, a boutique fitness studio, a local artisan marketplace. The strip mall began to transform, and foot traffic increased dramatically. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. The management company sent out notices to all tenants about the upcoming lease renewals and rent adjustments. I sat in my car across the street the morning I knew my parents would receive the notice. Dad got the mail as he always did at 10 a.m. I watched him open the envelope, saw his face change as he read it. He rushed inside, presumably to show Mom. Through the window, I could see them gesturing frantically, papers spread across the counter where I used to fold clothes. Mom wiped her eyes with her apron. Dad kept shaking his head. That afternoon, they called the number on the notice, not knowing they were calling the management company I'd hired. "Please," I heard Mom say through the recording I'd received later. "We've been here for 25 years. We can't afford triple the rent. Our daughter, she used to help us with the books, but..." Her voice broke. "Is there any way to negotiate?" I sat in my new office, the one with a view of the city skyline. listening to that message over and over. My mother's voice, smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it, asking for help. The next day, I received an email from the management company. My parents had scraped together every penny they could, trying to offer a counter-proposal. It wasn't nearly enough to match market rates, but they were trying. I stared at their desperate attempt to save their life's work and made another decision. I asked the management company to send them a different kind of letter. 2 days later, I watched through the window as Dad opened this new letter. His hands shook as he read it. Mom grabbed it from him, her eyes widening. The letter offered them a 5-year lease at their current rate, with only minimal annual increases for inflation. The only condition? They had to meet with the new owner in person to sign the paperwork. I scheduled the meeting for a Wednesday morning, deliberately choosing a time I knew they'd be in the store. As I parked my car that day, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. Gone was the scared girl who'd picked up her wet textbooks from the pavement. In her place was a successful businesswoman in a tailored suit, about to change everything. I took a deep breath and walked toward the store that had once been my prison, but had inadvertently set me free. The bell above the door chimed as I walked into Fashion Corner. The sound was exactly as I remembered, a gentle tinkle that had been the soundtrack to my childhood. The store smelled the same too, that mix of new clothes and the lavender air freshener Mom had always loved. "Welcome to Fashion Corner," Mom's voice called out automatically. She was in the back, probably sorting inventory like she did every Wednesday morning. Dad was behind the counter, organizing receipts with the same meticulous care he tried to instill in me. When they looked up and saw me, time seemed to stop. "Emily?" Mom whispered, the stack of sweaters in her arms tumbling to the floor. Dad's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, confusion, anger, and something else I couldn't quite read. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, but his voice lacked the authority it had carried 5 years ago. I straightened my shoulders, gripping my leather portfolio like a shield. "I believe you have a meeting scheduled with the new owner of the building." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's face turned that familiar shade of red, but this time I didn't flinch. "You?" he finally managed. "You bought the building?" "Yes." I pulled out the lease papers from my portfolio, laying them on the counter, the same counter where he'd slammed my course schedule 5 years ago. "Shall we discuss the terms?" Mom came forward slowly, like she was approaching a mirage that might disappear. "But how? Remember those useless classes?" I kept my voice professional, even as my heart raced. "Turns out accounting can feed you quite well." Dad picked up the lease with trembling hands. I watched as his eyes scanned the numbers that had once been so foreign to him, the language he dismissed as worthless. This can't be right," he muttered. "These rates, they're your current rates," I confirmed, "with minimal annual increases for inflation. The other tenants are paying market value, triple what you're paying. But for Fashion Corner, I'm offering a special long-term arrangement." "Why?" Mom's voice cracked on the word. I finally let myself really look at them. They'd aged in the past 5 years. Dad's hair was more gray than black now, and Mom's face had new lines I didn't remember. They looked smaller somehow, or maybe I'd just grown bigger. "Because you're my parents," I said simply, "and because this store is your dream. It wasn't mine. It never was. But I respect what you built here." Dad sat heavily in his chair, the lease papers crackling in his grip. "We thought When we got the first notice about the rent increase, we thought we'd lose everything. I know. I pulled out another chair and sat down, maintaining a professional distance despite the urge to close the gap of 5 years. I saw the notice being posted. That's why I bought the building. With what money? Mom asked, still struggling to understand. How could you afford? I worked hard, I said, unable to keep a hint of pride from my voice. I finished my degrees, got promoted, made connections, did everything you taught me about running a business, just not in the way you expected. A tear rolled down Mom's cheek. When you left? When you kicked me out, I corrected gently. Yes, she acknowledged, and the admission seemed to cost her. We thought you were making a terrible mistake. That you'd come back in a few weeks, apologizing. Instead, I built my own life. I finished. One where I could help you keep yours. Dad was still staring at the lease. These terms. We can afford this. We can stay. Yes, you can stay. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. The management company will send someone over this afternoon to finalize the paperwork. Unless, I hesitated, then took the plunge. Unless you prefer to sign them now, with me. The silence stretched between us, 5 years of hurt and pride and stubbornness making it hard to bridge the gap. Then Mom moved, crossing the space between us in 3 quick steps, and pulled me into a hug that smelled of lavender and home. My smart, stubborn girl, she whispered in my ear. I'm so sorry we didn't see. Dad cleared his throat. The books, he said gruffly. For the store. They're a mess since you left. Maybe you could look at them as our landlord? I felt a smile tugging at my lips. How about as your daughter instead? He nodded, and though he didn't hug me like Mom, he did reach out and squeeze my hand, the same hand he'd once slapped an accounting textbook from. We spent the next hour going through the lease, line by line. I explained each clause, each provision, just like I'd learned to do in those night classes they'd once despised. Mom made tea in the back room, using my old mug that she'd apparently never thrown away. As I was leaving, Dad called out, Emily? I turned at the door, the bell chiming above me. Next time, he said, his voice rough with emotion, use the back entrance. No need to wait for opening hours. You still have a key, right? I reached into my purse and pulled out my keychain. Among the new keys to my office, my condo, my car, there was a small brass key I'd never had the heart to remove. Never got rid of it, I said softly. That night, I sat in my office overlooking the city, adding another document to the lease file, a succession plan for Fashion Corner, ensuring that whenever my parents decided to retire, the store would stay in the family. Not because I wanted to run it. That dream had never been mine. But because sometimes protecting someone else's dream is just as important as chasing your own. A week later, Mom called. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't let it go to voicemail. The store numbers for this month, she said, her voice tentative but warm. I was hoping you could come by and look them over. Maybe stay for dinner after. I looked at my desk calendar, at the meetings and appointments that filled my days now. Then I looked at the small brass key on my keychain, the one that had waited 5 years to be used again. I'll come through the back door, I said. Save me some of Dad's dumplings. Her laugh was watery, but real. Always, Emily. Always. As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the office window. Behind me, I could see Fashion Corner's sign glowing in the twilight, looking fresher after the renovations, but still essentially the same. Like us, changed, but still standing, still family. Sometimes the longest journeys lead you right back home, just not in a way anyone expects. 5 years ago, I'd walked away from Fashion Corner with nothing but wet textbooks and a dream. Now I owned the building, had a successful career, and was finally building the relationship with my parents that I'd always wanted. One based on respect, rather than obligation. Education hadn't just fed me, it had given me the power to feed us all. The next morning, I used my key in the back door of Fashion Corner. The familiar scent of lavender welcomed me home, and this time, I stayed.